What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dynasty Underdog. Uriah's voice is a little rough, under the weather, so I'm going to captain the ship today. Excited, though. Jake is joining us unexpectedly, and and we're discussing 4 prospects today, so this should be a really fun one. Start with you. How you doing, Jake?
I'm good. A little wrecked, but it feels wrong to talk about my own exhaustion when there's someone who's, visibly sick on the actual pod this week. So I do apologize for making it about me. But no, I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Just a shout out, might not be here for a bit over the next few months, but wanted to kind of get one last piece out there. I will continue to provide prospect profiles. I will continue to provide prospect profiles as long as everyone's willing to accept some of my notes. But yes. It's been a pleasure. It's been awesome working through the last few months talking about some of these players. So I'm excited.
I promise to misrepresent all of your notes.
Please do. That was one of my favorite parts about the first episode of Prospect Profiles, because I think Uriah tried to read like some of my shorthand, like a sentence, and I was just like, all right, I need to work on how to actually do that better in the sheet.
Let me articulate this better. Yeah, I like Uriah with the 8 Mile going on.
How are you doing, Uriah?
I mean, honestly, better than I was yesterday and the day before. So
yeah,
we out here. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Could only go up, so
like a proper rookie prospect on the way up.
Pretty much, yeah. But we'll survive.
Hell yeah. AJ here, say it ain't so. Yeah, we will miss you, Jake. We will miss you for a bit, but we will have your insight on the prospects one way or another, so that's good. Excited about that. All right, cool. So we have a pretty slim show sheet today, but I think we'll have plenty to talk about. Start off with news and nonsense real quick here. Kellen Moore officially the coach in New Orleans after the Super Bowl victory. I mean, I guess we may as well mention that. Yeah, congrats to all the Eagles fans and Eagles out there. Yeah, got the division rivals in here all around, the Giants and the Cowboys fans. Not very pleased with that, but yeah, they put a whooping on Kansas City. That was pretty impressive. And Kellen Moore quickly gets the job that we pretty much knew he was going to get. Anyway, right after the Super Bowl, I mean, how do you guys feel about this? Uriah, I feel like you know Kellen Moore pretty intimately. Yes. How do you feel about this move?
I mean, look, the dude's brilliant. I fully believe, as far as, I mean, he sets a lot of like records at Boise State. Was it Boise State, right? Blue playing field, yeah. He just has a noodle arm, right? So he couldn't really actually be an NFL quarterback, but his brain, in my opinion, has always been super sharp when it comes to football. It was just a matter of time. It was, in my opinion, it really wasn't like if, but like when. And it takes some stones to take the Saints job, given the kind of lack of talent, draft picks, draft capital, all the other stuff. It's a big task. I hate to see. I hope they give him a long. I didn't see what his contract is, but I hope they give him time. Because there's a whole lot of shit that went on before he got there that he's going to have to like deal with. Like, it's not his fault that this is what was handed to him, but I think he's going to do well if given a long enough leash and long enough time to kind of get past some of the stuff that went on with Sean Payton and previous people that are making pretty bad decisions for that franchise. I like it. I mean, I'm going to root for Kellen Moore no matter where he is, except for maybe last Sunday. But yeah, I like the kid. It's a good hire.
It's interesting.
Any thoughts?
Yeah. And the only thing I was going to add is just it'll be interesting to see which and how he kind of moves around and handles that roster. Kind of to Uriah's point, it's not like he's being set up with this like beautiful roster ready to contend immediately. So there's going to be a lot of turnover, I'm assuming, over his first 2 years. With that being said, I do think that his general wide receiver and tight end usage will be really, really important. And so I'm curious to see if, someone like a Jawan Johnson or even Foster Moreau end up having like a pretty big uptick moving into year one, at least, just because they'll probably be relatively cheap options for him. And could be a good alternative. I also think that Derek Carr will probably have a relatively positive first year with Kellen Moore as well, regardless of what people think of him. People being myself, I will talk honestly. I don't have a ton of respect for his skill set. And funny enough, if you think about Derek Carr as a whole and Kellen Moore, they played against each other when Kellen Moore was at Boise State and Derek Carr was at Fresno State. And if anyone remembers, Kellen Moore absolutely whooped up on Derek Carr at the time. So, it'll be an interesting dynamic just because, they're relatively similar age and how that will kind of work itself through. But yeah, I think all in all, it's an interesting appointment. What are your thoughts, Billy?
Yeah, no, I think it's like you said, it's an interesting hire. I think that he has a pretty good resume in terms of offensive mind, and so yeah, I think it's nice. I just think in terms of trying to project anybody on this team outside of probably Alvin Kamara, who's and Derek Carr, who are pretty much locked and loaded for the next year or two, at least, it could look so different, by 2026. I forget what year we're in, but yeah, I think it's a good hire, and like your eye said, he needs probably a good couple of years, and I'm sure the Saints know that given the roster. Yeah, pretty good hire coming off the Super Bowl. Lots of new coaches this year. It's going to be very, very interesting seeing what goes down all around the league, trying to predict and diagnose what all these people are going to do, the strategies, all that good stuff. So yeah, an exciting one. Okay, cool. On to some, I guess, nonsense. Exactly what it is. Reactive devaluation. This was a really cool thing that was brought up in our Discord by our buddy Textbook. So I'll just read it off here. Random tidbit. There's a name for that feeling of receiving an offer and then assuming because you received that offer, it must be bad for you and good for the other person who sent the trade. Just a random thing I found. Fun to put a name to it. Reactive devaluation, and then there was a little screenshot here which says similar stuff, but it comes from essentially a social psychology term, reactive devaluation, which kind of makes sense. So any thoughts on that?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there is this preconceived notion, kind of like the idea of someone has to be duping you to be sending out an offer. There's no way that they would be potentially wanting to lose in a trade offer off the bat. Like, where am I, potentially losing out in this deal? And then you probably tend to overanalyze, hyperanalyze an experience like this more often than not. And funny enough, going back to not last episode, but maybe 2 episodes when I think I wasn't present, the two of you spoke about how it's really good to kind of feed off of others and, get their input with regards to trade negotiations or valuations. And I think this is one of those prime examples of when you are going through this reactive devaluation, if you almost, pose this question to a neutral audience, another Discord, another friend of yours who you trust their opinion, and they tell you point blank, oh, I picked that side, maybe that's when you should pull off your blinders and start putting in, a better representation of what the actual reality is of that trade. Because I do think that this does happen to almost all of us when we get a new trade offer. What about you, Uriah?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's just, I love that there's a term for it, but it just kind of speaks to the fact I believe that almost every single one of us, when we send an offer, we're not sending our best, right? Our best and final. So technically, the offer in and of itself is devalued. That's the point, right? It's supposed to be a starting point. It's nothing to get discouraged about, but I would say it's totally normal to feel that way, and it's totally normal in pretty much all trade negotiations and all offers that you receive. What I wouldn't do is get over the skis and start personally devaluing those specific assets on your team. You just got to know that, hey, this is just typically how trade talks start, and then run it by somebody you trust. And if it's players that you're willing to move, or the players that they're offering are players that you would like on your team, if something could get done, then that's a good starting point. But I wouldn't let it discourage you about the assets that you have, which is kind of typical in trading in Dynasty.
Right. And even if the motive is to get one over on your opponent, which is probably most of the time. Like when you're sending a trade, you're like, yeah, I'm going to win this thing, right? You're not like, this is going to be bad for me and good for them.
Yeah.
I like, even if that's happening, it still doesn't mean that the trade is bad for you. You know, and I think that's the point of like the reactive devaluation. It's like, it's just specifically reactive for no inherent reason necessarily, right? Like, it's true that that's the nature of the game, but it doesn't always mean that that is the case with the trade, which is a hard thing to piece together. I feel like, right, to square. You're like, this doesn't quite, these two things don't make sense when you say them next to each other. But I think that's just kind of the nature of the game. And I've been sent plenty of offers where I'm like, smash, sure. And
Yeah.
so it's like,
Sure.
it's not always a bad offer for you. And it's really nice to have a term for it, reactive devaluation, because I think it also helps, it helps obviously what we're doing right now, describe it, but then you can remember that and not react in that way. It's kind of the point, or at least acknowledge it, understand it, and like work with it rather than it work against you completely. And yeah, that's what we should be doing with all these different aspects of Dynasty. AJ here in the comments on YouTube. And if you respect your trade partner's opinions, you feel like you're missing something. Yeah, right. And I mean, that's a good point too. It's like, if I get an offer from one of you guys who I know very well, it's like instant decline, because you're like, there's obviously something happening here that is a miss. And so like, I get what AJ's saying for sure. It's like, if there's people who you respect, who you would normally ask these questions to, it's like, you do get a little, in the mud. You're like, I don't know if this would work. How do I approach this? How do I navigate this? And so I think you inherently have that reaction to it. But again, maybe there's an opportunity there, so you don't always want to take it that way, right? That's the idea. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, news and nonsense. We're done with that. One topic I wanted to get into, probably won't take too long, and then we'll hop into our prospect profiles, but leaving Dynasty leagues. So I don't know, Jake, if you probably haven't had to experience this. I actually haven't experienced this until this year. I'm like 7-8 years in. Never left a Dynasty league until this year. But I know Uriah has before, and we haven't talked about it in a while, but now that I'm personally dealing with it, I kind of wanted to bring it back up, have a conversation about it. Like, do you ever feel bad, Uriah, when you leave a league? That's a tongue twister for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I've left 3. The 2 I left were safe leagues, which got us, Garbo and W. Joe, some of the guys who are now in our Discord and are in our leagues now. Those were the guys who were actually active. It was in safe leagues, by the way. Safe leagues, you go on, you get a Dynasty league with people you've never met before, and it's all kosher. But the inactivity in those leagues for me, as far as chat and discourse and communication, just trying to get a deal done to undo a bad trade or anything else that you could normally do in other Dynasty treats. Like, I found in those 2 leagues, I was not able to do it. I was in them for like 3-4 years ish. And just, there's no joy in those leagues, like just setting lineups. And like, I didn't feel bad leaving those ones because I wasn't attached to anybody in the league there. But this last one that I left was one that I've been in since 2020, 2019, 2000, like early on. And I really liked that team and I liked the league. It just, I didn't really have much room for it anymore. And here's the thing about it. Like, here's the question you have. Like, what if the team is bad? I probably would have left that league the year before, but I had been like second place. And it kind of went on where I was spinning futures to try to get to first place, over and over and over. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take a run at it this year again and not sell my firsts next year. That way, hey, if I end up in second or third again, I could leave happily knowing, hey, whoever's sitting on my roster is a good roster that's never, ever come less than third place, but also has picks. So I could kind of wash my hands of that one, knowing, hey, I left a good team behind. I feel a little bit bad, but it is what it is. Like, there's just really no place for that league in my portfolio.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Before I jump in here, Jacob T in the YouTube comments, past experiences of having leagues fold is why my strategy in startups is to win now. In the words of Denzel Washington, I'm leaving here with something.
Sure.
I love that. I love that comment. That's great. And I can understand that for sure. I mean, the majority of leagues I'm in have not folded. So that's not something I've like ever been really concerned with. But I typically go about my strategies kind of in a more win now fashion anyway. So I guess it would typically just go that way most of the time for me. But for me this year, I mean, I have quite a few leagues. I'm up just under 20, 20 leagues, or this past year I was at, I think 17 or 18 leagues. And for the most part, like all my leagues are super engaging. I enjoy them. You know, four of them are DU leagues. There's another one going to be 5 of them are DU leagues, a couple like home type leagues or whatever. So quite a few leagues that I really enjoy, a couple that I was, you know, the first year I ever started playing Dynasty, I'm still in, and have no interest in leaving. But I just kind of realized, first of all, it was just like a lot, both like financially, even though honestly, each year I've made enough to cover all my entry fees, but it's just still like quite a bit of money to even just like have on your mind, you know? And so for me, I was like, I just kind of want to cut some of like the higher cost leagues. That was kind of my only motivation. It wasn't really like, you know, these leagues are terrible. I mean, the one I did leave, I didn't really know anybody from that league except for like 1 or 2 people. And it was the person who brought me in there, which I feel really bad because they wanted to kind of curate this league with people that they liked. And so that made me feel even worse because obviously I was like, we were all specifically picked. But but what was even worse about it was that the team was not bad. There's a lot of really good pieces on it, but like very thin at quarterback. You know, I've traded picks away. I paid for future years, of course. I, you know, paid those out. I would never ask for money back or anything like that. So they wouldn't have to, you know, get fees for the next year or whoever is coming in and taking over. So, I mean, there's no like issues necessarily, but it wasn't my best work for sure. And I would have liked to have seen it through. And so that made me feel even worse about it. Like and so like it honestly, I was like struggling. Should I actually do this? Should I not? And at the end of the day, I was just like, I think this is, if I'm even thinking about this, is probably better for myself and for the league that I just part ways. And so at the end of the day, I did do that, but it made me feel really, really terrible. It's not something that I want to do. So yeah, I mean, it's just something. I mean, I also have another league where I'm not a big fan of keeper leagues, and so I feel like I might do that too. It's also a more expensive one, so it's like at the end of the day, it's like if both things coincide, or it's like also a pretty high price league and you're not enjoying it that much, I feel like it's probably the best thing to do. But man, I don't know. It's something I really struggle with because obviously we all get into dynasty leagues. And for me, the intention is commitment is to be there forever. And then when you're not, it's like you kind of broke that commitment. So I don't know. I'll leave it at that. I guess it was just really something to talk through, more of like a therapy session. But Jake, do you have any thoughts before we move on? Even though you haven't left any leagues, you've heard us kind of, you know, go through it.
Yeah, no, I don't want to talk about what it's like leaving a league because I've never done it, to your point. But what I do want to talk about is I think that there's a lot of like inherent, I guess, guilt that both of you have kind of spoken about through that process. And I want to come at it from like a commissioner standpoint because it's happened to me as commissioner where someone has left the league. And I think like the biggest thing that, you know, you as a manager, someone who's playing this game, like want to do is respect the commissioner and the person who has to, you know, replace your spot. And so all I can say to the listeners is like, make sure that your communication style is blunt, transparent, and on time. So like, don't give this person any additional work, you know, 2 weeks before the rookie draft. Like, make sure that this is a process that you're giving ample time so someone can put themselves in a better situation to properly publish and almost market this opening that's in the league now. Make sure that the different league mates can hopefully reach out to their resources, things like that. Thankfully, we're in a pretty, you know, amicable space. You can kind of reach out to almost anyone to help publish and produce, you know, open leagues, open spots, and orphans in general. So, you know, just try and do things respectfully, I think, to your league mates. I think we inherently put too much pressure on ourselves to like almost abide by this like unwritten law that exists that like I need to be in this league from onset to completion, or I took over this orphan and I need to see it to its, best abilities. And the reality is that, life comes in our way. Like things happen, things pop up. The worst thing you can do is push to the point of you having to give up at the wrong time. And the best way to handle it is just kind of be real with yourself, communicate effectively, and just make sure that, you can maybe even try and assist on the way out if you can, if you know someone who might want to take it over, things like that. But outside of that, just make sure that you're transparent and get rid of it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Like doing it early on was a big part of like why I wanted to do it now is like I just want them to have enough time to fill it. Because as a commissioner of quite a few leagues myself, I've been there. I've had somebody dip out in the middle of a rookie draft, and it's a terrible feeling.
We did.
Like we've had that happen, and it's like it's a terrible feeling. So like that, I totally, and that's part of why I feel bad, right? Like you're just like this sucks. Like I know that this is going to suck for them, but I was very transparent. I said everything I said to you guys pretty much to the commissioner, and they were actually really cool about it. So like I probably shouldn't feel as bad, and I appreciate Jake, you saying all that. I do think that's a like good headspace to be in, and it's just good to keep that energy, I feel like, and keep that in mind as you approach these things, because like again, you can get really excited about getting into Dynasty and get over your skis, we'll say again, and you can join too many leagues for sure. And I don't feel like that's necessarily what I did. It's been 8 years and I'm still under 20, which I feel like is pretty good for this community. But there was probably more there than I needed to be in. And a couple of them I joined, remembering I joined and I was like kind of at my limit then. And I was like, yeah, I'll do one more. And it's like, when you're saying that, you should probably not join another one. So I'm keeping it very slim. I got DU5 this year and no other plans, which is very exciting. So replace a league that was not enjoying with one I know I'm going to enjoy very much. And that also kind of feels bad. Like, you're joining another league and leaving one, but I still feel like the reasons are justifiable, and I feel okay about it. But yeah, such a weird thing with Dynasty because it's supposed to be there forever, and now I'm not. But okay, cool. We can move on. Maybe one day Jake will have more for us when he does leave a league, if that ever happens. Hopefully it never does. Hopefully his Dynasty leagues are forever and he is married to them forever.
I'm just going to watch them crumble instead, so it's fine.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, when you said the orphan thing earlier, I was like, yeah, you just father it dies, right? Like no matter what, like you have to be there until it flourishes or it dies. So okay, cool. All right, let's move on to prospect profiles. I'm excited for today. We have a couple really good ones. The running backs, in my opinion, not so much, but we will get there. So we're going to start with 2 wide receivers, 2 of the more high-profile wide receivers in this class. Let's just hop into it. Let's hop right into it. We're going to jump into Luther Burden, Missouri. Am I wrong about that? Missouri?
You're not?
Okay, good. Yeah, like this stuff is just logged in my head somewhere, and I just pull it up every once in a while from the depths. Okay, Luther Burden. Yeah, this is a dynamic wide receiver.
Yes.
I think he's a pretty exciting guy to watch. I think he has some pretty unique skills. I think the NFL is going to like him, but I totally lost where he was over here. Okay. Jake, why don't you jump in first and then I'll jump in.
Sure. So I definitely liked a lot of the tape that I saw, even though a lot of the notations I'm going to talk through are a little negative, because I don't think that any of the wide receivers in this class are top tier, for lack of better words. Like I think they kind of just hover right in, especially the top 3, I think kind of hover in that like tier 2 wide receiver range. They probably might even be borderline tier 3 from like last year's cream of the crop. So with that being said, one of the big things that I noticed was his general dumbing down of his route tree from 2023 to 2024. And I think that was just a general QB development issue that he then had to kind of acclimate to. That did have a mild drop in yards per route run and average depth of target. So you started seeing him run significantly more screens. You started seeing him in a lot more shorter passing routes than you did in 2023, which I thought was pretty interesting. But one of the biggest things that I did notice as an additional negative that I did want to call out for him was simply his lack of coverage awareness. And by this, I mean, like, there's this ability for typically receivers, tight ends, et cetera, to understand kind of their gap between their body and, the individual secondary that is covering them. I found that Burden was almost like alarmed whenever he was contacted. And I thought that that was particularly odd for a relatively higher end wide receiver in the NFL draft. I think we'll probably see him fall somewhere in probably like the 15 to 25 range. And to be there, I still think that you need to be a little bit more aware of your general surroundings. I do love his post-catch physicality. I do find that he is very into, almost to a fault, running into defenders. Like, that's just something that he loves to do. There's almost I don't think he reminds me of Debo, but he has like that very like traditional physical receiver aspect post reception, even though he doesn't necessarily have that size like a conventional physical receiver. And a couple of major things that I did notice, I do love that he has some expansion in his catch point, but I did find that his arms felt relatively short and didn't really have large reach. So what I did see more often than not, though, due to that, was just extreme ability to run after the catch. So in the game against Texas A&M, showed off high levels of athleticism, lots of bouncing off of defenders. And this was multiple times in a game situation. And then I wanted to look back into his 2023 tape, which I thought was really interesting, was that against BC, he was able to, actually, this was 2024. Sorry. This was around like the 3-minute 10 mark. There was just like a quick out where his feet kind of get caught up and it looks like he's about to fall on his face. And he ends up making a good infield cut back in away from the secondary. He ends up just bursting through 4 different corners and 1 safety. It was pretty impressive, but also at the same time, it was like one of those plays that, he's going to get smacked in the NFL most realistically if he makes that same decision. But I just loved the general confidence in a player to be able to do that, which I think one of the things that I've noticed in this wide receiver class is that we do happen to have a lot of like higher end skilled receivers that don't happen to have a ton of confidence. And that's the one thing that I do like about Luther Burden over a bunch of the other guys that we're going to probably talk about over the next few weeks. But yeah, that's kind of where I was at. What about you, Billy?
Yeah, it's good stuff. You might have found some more negatives than I did, at least specifically. But I maybe it's just entirely with this class. I don't think any of these guys are great like route technicians necessarily. Like, there's some good route runners, don't get me wrong, but none of them are like those elite, like high-end, twitchy, manipulative route runners in general. But I do think Burden's like pretty good for the most part. I think he's, pretty good at beating press coverage. He's a quick guy, good pacing, I think, on his routes in general, but smooth release, almost instantly at top speed off the line. I think that's pretty noticeable. He does have an ability to beat press coverage with some release moves. But you would like to see more of a variety. He seems to kind of stick to the kind of same thing over and over again. I do think that he uses contact pretty well during the route. Like, I think that instead of being disrupted, and maybe this is something that we differ on, Jake, just kind of from the sounds of it, but I feel like he uses contact to separate a little bit more than he does to kind of be disrupted from it. I don't think he's like the best separator, but I did kind of notice that on film. I think he lacks some nuance during the stem of the route, kind of what I was talking about before. Like, I just think, mid route with these guys, none of them are like the best technicians or, the most refined, I would say. But he's a super dynamic receiver. I think extremely reliable hands, above average ball skills all around, really good body control in general. I mean, there's a play versus Texas A&M around like 14, 15 minutes, exceptional execution on the back shoulder. You see it multiple times on tape in general. I just think, he does a good job separating with timing and sideline awareness. Really good ball tracking skills, excellent burst and good top speed. He's creative and elusive after the catch. I would like to see more refinement, like I said, in terms of that route technique. Other than that, I mean, he lacks strength as a blocker. Like you said, I agree. He lacks that catch radius, really. So there are some limitations to his game. So I think that's why, he doesn't get like those, those high scores, but he got a pretty high score for me. He's at the top of this class, like right in, in the 1 to 3 range, I would say. Obviously not 1, probably in like the 2 to 3 range. But he's right up there with the best of them in this class, I think. What about you, Uriah? Anything on film? Anything from the data side? What are you thinking on this guy?
I did not watch any film on Luther Burden. My bad. But
No?
on the
It's okay.
data side, it's okay. But it's important to point out that he had a breakout age of 18. He's an early declarer, which I think that we're seeing a little bit less of that in the NFL, just because folks are trying to go back for money. So obviously, he's heard from the people that are in charge of making sure he gets to the NFL in a proper way that, hey, you're highly sought after in the NFL draft. His yards after the catch per route is 6.1, but his ADOT's 9. So and his slot percentage is 85.3. So you guys probably saw that on film. So that makes sense that his ADOT's going to be kind of low and his yards after the catch will be kind of low if he's always kind of lining up in the slot. But it seems like with his man yards per route run, it's 3.59. That's a really exceptional number. So it means that whoever is being lined up on him in the slot typically is getting beat often. So that's good enough for us. And we all know that slot wide receivers are really good for us in PPR scoring. So yards per team, pass attempt is 1.7, yards per route run 2.32. Those are all exceptional, or not exceptional, but they definitely fit the bucket of a player that's going to succeed in the NFL. His dominator rating is 31.7. Maybe that's because Missouri. So maybe there's not a lot of competition there. Again, you guys know a little bit more about that stuff than I do, but everything I can see here is pretty good. His contested catch rate is only 54.5, but that's got to be just getting bodied by like linebacker, nickel corner, just being in a high traffic area for the majority of his catches. I can see that's where you're going to get a lot of drops because you're trying either not to get popped or you're getting contact before the ball gets to you. So I can't really knock him for that.
Yeah, I think the numbers actually do line up pretty well to the tape, to your point, Uriah. And if I remember correctly, his yards per route run in 2023 was somewhere in the mid 2s. So it's a pretty big drop from what you just described
2.3.
as what. It's 2.3.
Yeah,
okay,
last year.
Never mind. Then maybe it was like up in the mid 2s. Then maybe it was like 2.5 or 2.6, but still still a decent drop.
Yes.
And something to notice, I think that slot rate, and I would love to see what his slot rate was like in 2023 as well. I don't know off the top of my head, but I am curious if that had a relatively big impact, especially on that and his ADOT. But regardless, I do think that there is a lot to like about Luther Burden, and I do think that there's a really good comment about him as well in the show chat, specifically from Jacob T. And he just talks about how, he is a fantastic athlete, which is almost like his deficit or his weakness. Because I do think that a lot of the times, especially within college, he didn't necessarily work with, high-end coaching. Missouri's football program, while he was there, pretty mid-tier. And I don't think that they necessarily, to Billy's point, they didn't really work on his refinement. Instead, they just kind of let him ball out. So he's the type of player where, because of that lack of like hand holding, he could very well kind of refine himself into a relatively high end player within the NFL, as long as he lands in a good space. Honestly, he's the type of wide receiver that if he landed, in my opinion, in like Green Bay, would probably excel tremendously. Like I think a Matt LaFleur would work really well with someone like that. I think he could also really fall into a pretty solid like wide receiver 2 spot in a high end team, but maybe even Dallas, if Dallas really wanted a second wide receiver. I think there's spaces where someone like him can really excel in, but if he falls into the wrong hands, there's definitely a possibility of him kind of just like phasing out even where he's at. And I did see that you dropped an additional stat on him in the show sheet.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Yes. Just for the mock draft, NFL mock draft database. Again, not the Bible, but they have him right now currently going 16th. So
Oh, nice.
middle of the first round.
Yeah. I said 15 to 25. Nice. Okay.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's solid. See, I'd be pretty interested in him if he's going in there. And 85% slot rate, like I don't think any of you were concerned about it, but I wouldn't be at all. That's actually
No.
kind of encouraging. I like it.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's good that, I mean, you'd obviously like to see the ADOT or not the yards after the catch come up a little bit, but he is really elusive on tape. So I'm surprised. I mean, he's not none of these guys have like the elite traits though. Like he's very elusive, but he's not like game breaking elusive. You know, like he's really not like you don't see him just like, you know, breaking tackles left and right and scoring. Like that's not really what he's doing. He's very shifty. He does get away from tackles, but he's not like, he doesn't have the most balance and all that stuff. So I think there's like some limitations to the game, though. I agree that he could be really, really good in like a Green Bay system or as a wide receiver too. In general, I think that'd be great. Just a couple notes here. What was I thinking about? Oh yeah. I just wanted to point out while we're talking about these wide receivers and we're talking about some of the guys at the top of the class, just for like a quick one, just going into P. Howdy's database, and you can do this with a couple different metrics if you want, but if you sort just like the max adjusted, and this is just for wide receivers in draft year 2024 and 2025, so last year and this year, if you just filter the max adjusted yards per team attempt, greatest to least, there is, I think, one wide receiver, maybe two in the top 10, and one of them is number 10, and it's Emeka Egbuka, and then Ted McMillan comes in around like 5-ish. So I just for a very quick and dirty way to look at it, like the class is just not nearly as good as what we've been seeing in terms of like high-end talent at the top.
Yeah.
There's a lot of decent players in there. Like if you look throughout the list, they're pretty good. And in terms of that metric though, like Burden is way down the list compared in general just to last year's class. Still very good, and that's yards per team attempt, not pass attempt. I think I like pass attempt a little bit better for the receivers, but adjusted for altogether, just the same position, I think it's fine. And you can look at it like that. And I think it's just good, descriptive measure for the current class that we're looking at right now. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we covered Burden pretty well there. I felt like I had something else I wanted to say. Maybe it'll come up while we're talking about our next player here. We can move on unless anybody had anything else they wanted to say real quick.
Nope.
No.
Okay, cool. AJ, real quick in the comments, this was when Jake was talking, so he's not a dog. Reference to maybe some of the physicality that he couldn't really take on. It's going to be about fit for Burden more than anything. I think that's fair. I think that fit is going to matter. I mean, it always matters with these guys. It's important. But I do think he has a pretty versatile skill set that could be used in quite a few different situations. But yeah, I would hate to see him to go to like just a terrible offense, a terrible coach, something like that. That would not be good. Yak Monster. He is not a Yak Monster per the numbers, at least not in 2024. But he could be, maybe. One thing I did want to say, what was I going to say? Oh, fuck. It just slipped my mind. About him. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on and talk about Emeka Egbuka. I actually really like this player. One of my favorite in this class. He may end up being my favorite. But still, I would like to see a little bit more route refinement for Egbuka just in certain parts of the technique. I'm going to just hop right into it. For me, I would, again, another player I would like to see just more nuance in the middle of the route, at the stem of the route, when he's really working through it before he's breaking. I would just like to see a little bit more movement, a little bit more, the head fakes, the manipulation, all that different stuff. I think he has it in him, and I would like to see more of it. I think he could do a little bit better job of beating press, and he's pretty good. All these metrics, I think he's about above average in, but just about above average. I think separation could be a little bit better, but release concept is probably the lowest part of his game for me, where I just feel like off the line, he doesn't have much in terms of diversity. It's really kind of one size fits all. Now, maybe I'm wrong there, but that's just kind of what I see. I do think he does offer some pretty above average manipulation movement, good footwork, good pacing. I think he runs his routes really upright with like a narrow gait, which is interesting. He looks a lot like Deebo Samuel when he's running his routes, not necessarily like the after the catch stuff or anything like that. It's just the way he looks when he's running routes. Quick and twitchy route runner. He can run pretty much an entire route tree, so that's no problem. You see a bunch of different routes. Excellent burst from the release. Above average stem nuance. Like I said, would like to see more manipulation movement, but it's there. It's just I would like to see more pronouncement of it, more micro movements that are already on display. Does a good job of manipulation by selling blocks and pacing routes. Like you see that a lot where he'll kind of just go out and fake like he's, blocking for a run, and he's just, made a defender look absolutely foolish. So that's a good part of his game. Demonstrates good ability to separate using physicality during the sum of the route. Great use of shoulder and bend to leverage defenders and push off and forward to stack. So he does a really good job of using his physicality to kind of lean into guys, work a little bit off of maybe where he wants to go directionally with the route, and then work back to kind of what he's trying to do. And he does a good job of kind of creating that separation by using that physicality. Very reliable hands, good body control, excellent ball tracking through contact. See a lot of close coverage, a lot of contested catches, and you don't really see many drops with him. Strong athlete, really, really strong, wide base, resulting in really good natural balance. I don't think he exhibits great lateral agility, however. He is elusive, but more driven by that balance and physicality, kind of bouncing off guys, staying upright. He lacks speed, or at least at elite speed. I do think he has some speed, and he doesn't really have that extra gear. Burst is really best on display during, I think, like the stem of the route, when he's like really getting into the route or pacing the route, and then he's going to, make a dynamic move to accelerate. Really great sideline awareness, really technically sound, fundamentally sound wide receiver, often with 2 feet even at the collegiate level, which I think is worth mentioning. And just in terms of blocking, he was one of the better blockers in this class. I thought he displayed excellent technique. He was aggressive and good strength to ward off defenders. So I think he's a route technician type. I wouldn't say he's a route technician. I think he can get there. He's just kind of got room for improvement of the finer details. Exceptional ball skills, displays ability to secure the target through contact, like I said. And yeah, all the other stuff, I think I pretty much already said that would be in kind of my main breakdown here. Yeah, I guess any thoughts on that, Jake?
Sorry, I do agree with almost everything that you said. I think typically we actually watch wide receivers relatively similarly. But the one thing I did want to shout out, and you talked about it, was that I do find that his nuance pacing within a route is probably his most elite trait. So to your point, he's not necessarily like an insanely fast wide receiver, but I do find that he knows how to manipulate space, specifically between defenders and space. So being in the slot really helps him kind of elevate that, but you see that acceleration within the route. So typically, like you were saying, almost post stem or at stem, and then be able to like burst into certain areas of the field at a relatively higher rate. And I do find that I haven't seen any other receiver within this class be able to do that. So just from my own watching, that has been something that I really only saw, truth be told, in the last 2 classes, Malik Neighbors be able to do, but that's just
I'm much more dynamic rate. Yeah,
I'm not comparing them at all. I'm just saying like that was the only other receiver in the last 2 years that I've been able to like actually say and write down the almost similar verbiage. So that was something that I noticed and I really did like. The only other thing that I did want to talk about was just like his general diverse usage within the slot. I do think a lot of people, when they think of players performing in the slot, especially like, the ancient or historical perspective of it, I did find that his actual route tree was relatively more diverse even within the slot, which was pretty interesting. There was also a lot of slot motion, very similar to what you see like in Los Angeles with the Rams. So think of, Cooper Kupp pre-Puka or Puka over the last 2 years. Definitely lots of that specifically for Egbuka. And I thought overall he performed relatively well. Now, with all that being said, he's kind of been a very interesting prospect throughout his collegiate career because he's always kind of been the the number 2, even though he's always been talked about as like the next big thing. And then someone else just kind of like outshines him, unfortunately, the next year. So, this year, unfortunately, was Jeremiah Smith. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing when you think of the other receivers that have been around him. And I think it's kind of leaving almost like a snail trail on top of him. And the sludge, I don't think really matches the play. I think this is definitely someone who we should be respecting a bit more. And I think Uriah's stats that he was going to talk about and metrics will align well with, I think, the player that we're seeing on tape, as well as, where the NFL might actually end up drafting him. So I think that's a good transition. Uriah?
Sorry, yeah. I do just want to say this does feel a little JSN-y, like where there's always somebody ahead of him and then he comes in, and also the profile is kind of similar. Not exactly, but kind of. Sorry, go ahead, Uriah. Hop in.
No, I mean, I was almost going to be like, I don't really have much to add because everything you guys just said really does show up in the sheets here, which is, we love that when this happens. Late declare, 19-year-old breakout age. His average dominator of 23.5, like on paper, if you didn't know who he's playing along with, like you'd be like, well, that's average. But like he literally has like a dude that could go to the NFL right now. The only thing that's holding him back is the rules.
Exactly.
But much like Luther Burden, Egbuka, pretty mediocre yak after reception was 5.8. I think Egbuka was 6.1. I believe you're trying to go back to that stat earlier. His ADOT's 8.2, something that somebody playing from the slot. 81% of the rate is pretty average or pretty normal. ADOT to be under 9. Yards per team pass attempts 2.2. Again, that's a really good bucket to be in. Anything over 2 is really solid. 2.2 is pretty good. Versus zone was 2.19. Versus man was 2.64. You guys kind of covered it all there. Everything that you guys said on film really kind of matches what he has going on in the sheets. He seems to be like a pretty decent player. Honestly, I'm not sure if it's like, true alpha wide receiver 1 type player, but we'll see about that.
Muted.
I know. I was coming back to it. I was on the other screen.
I was like, the whole time?
No, that's good. Real quick here, some comments on the YouTube side. Luther Burden, to me, is a fantastic athlete. This is from Jacob, and that's also his greatest weakness throughout his football career. You can just tell coaches just allowed him to freestyle. I don't see the refinement. Yeah. I mean, there needs to be definitely some improvement there, some development as he gets into the league. It's definitely apparent. I think with all these guys, but yeah, Burden a little bit more than Egbuka, I think, as we're talking it through here for sure, and some of the finer details. Again, Jacob, Egbuka, and Burden are such interesting case studies of the wide receiver position. Egbuka looks like a player that's been a wide receiver since youth football, very skilled at the position. Yeah, he's just, I mean, in terms of, the fundamentals when it comes to like ball skills, and he's obviously, we're talking about very good with the pacing and some of the manipulation stuff. So I think it really shows on tape. The only thing is he's not the most dynamic athlete, right? So it's like the lateral agility is not there. Even in terms, like in comparison to Luther Burden, he's not nearly as elusive even. They're different kinds of elusive, I think. Oh, wow. Damn. Luther Burks. Wow, really doing that to him. I think he has a little more juice than
Treylon Burks, wide receiver 1. Can't tell me otherwise.
I think he has, yeah, we all fell. Oops. Many of us fell into that trap. Unfortunate, but yeah. So I think that these guys are very interesting case studies. I think that Egbuka definitely, I think, has the higher floor. Definitely a better chance of succeeding more immediately. Again, it sounds like a JSN script all over again. Sounds like I'm reading from a JSN script. But I like these guys quite a bit. I'm going to probably have Egbuka like wide receiver 1, 2. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to end on it with him and Tet. It's probably going to be very landing spot draft capital dependent with those guys. And yeah, so I think that's where we're at with these two players. Very, very interesting players in this draft. Yeah, we're all going to be waiting to see where Burden goes, because I do think that we might find him a little bit more like landing spot dependent kind of deal. But we'll see. We'll see where that all ends up. A lot has to kind of to shake out here. So we're going to move on to 2 more prospects before we get out of here. We're switching gears a little bit. We just hit the wide receivers, and we're going to move on to some running backs. a couple of the probably later drafted running backs, especially for fantasy, or at least mid to late. But we'll see where that all ends up. Let's jump into it. We're going to start with Ollie Gordon, a guy that I'm not really too excited about personally. Let me just find my notes here. Okay, so with Ollie Gordon, I mean, one of the things that I don't love about him is he runs high, and I think that he lacks refinement in terms of footwork. He does exhibit some decent indirect contact balance and some direct contact balance, but he really, in my opinion, lacks true power and balance in traffic, and he can be taken down more easily than I expected personally. From an athleticism standpoint, it's really mediocre. I think he offers good bend, but not much agility. Really don't see much side-to-side movement. And, in terms of elusiveness, it's not really there, in my opinion. He can hit a hole with good speed, but doesn't really display exceptional burst or agility. I do think he excels in space. He can avoid contact here and there. I do think that from a receiving perspective, he's actually okay. He has really good hands, pretty good ball tracking, good transition speed. But it's in general, like from an actual route running perspective, like it's just more leaking out of the backfield, screens, those kind of things. And so not really refined in terms of like a route runner or anything like that. Not that you would expect that from many running backs, but still. I think he has questionable vision at the second level. I don't really think that he's a great processor of information on the field in terms of being able to diagnose and quickly react. In terms of pass protection, just like shoots for defenders' legs 95% of the time. Really don't even see them put him into position to do it much. More often than not, he's leaking out, even when not really targeted or anything like that. Doesn't square up or uses leverage well, in my opinion. So just average speed, but evasive in open space, a bit clunky when changing direction. I'm trying to think. I feel like I put that somewhere here, but basically I did. So he doesn't throttle down at all or juke much. Like you never see any of that like side to side movement or lateral movement. But when he is changing direction, it's like his entire body shifts direction or like leans the way he's going. And sometimes it works for him because he has okay athleticism, but in general, it's just not something that I see being successful on average at the next level. So I'll leave it at that. Jake, thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, these two running backs I did not particularly enjoy, I will say. To start off with Ollie Gordon, I think you covered a lot of where I was writing about. Talked about stiff lower and upper body, prevents avoidance of tackle, and quick to refine movements to get away from a tackle. He lacks that breakaway speed even when he gets into open spaces. This is specifically from 2024 tape, and I do have a quick anecdote that I did want to talk about. He does have really solid hands, to Billy's point, but I do think that he actually lacks concentration in game. He just generally seemed like he has really poor stamina for a high-level running back. And I did find that his general run after contact was relatively poor. So I don't know what his missed tackles force were like, but generally after any type of contact, he looked like he went down almost immediately. For someone his size, that was pretty surprising. So I was just something that was noticed. The other thing I did want to talk about before completely shitting on this poor guy is that in 2023,
he's probably a really good dude.
He was probably an amazing,
great guy.
Yeah, that's going to probably come back to bite us, and someone will probably quote us. And his 2023 tape was significantly better. I did watch 2 games from 2023 as well. He looks significantly more limber, significantly better movement on his ankles, just general weight placement just looks more healthy. And then I looked at his numbers. The dude touched the ball over 300 times in 2023 in only 14 games. That's a ton. 285 carries, almost 40 receptions. I think we literally saw what we talk about in the NFL, a player who basically touches the ball too much, just straight up overexposure of an athlete, and just look like a worn down
bell cow. You know, I love the terminology that Jacob T popped up. Thanks, Billy, for popping up before. He looks like a plotter, right? Like he looks like a dude who's carrying.
Yes, Ollie the Plotter Gordon. Yeah,
like that might be the nickname of like 7 like bulls on like a farm. You know, like I am pretty sure that that's like how he runs now.
Ollie. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
So that was the only thing that I did want to shout out. He just looks like a completely different human being and athlete between the 2 years, which is relatively concerning and not something that I'd want to necessarily buy into. But I think that is kind of where we're sitting at, and kind of similar to Devin Neal. You know, a lot of the Devin Neal tape in 2023 is more promising to watch than 2024 tape. I think that's just kind of the reality. Yeah. There's a comment that just popped up, actually. I think these guys showed good tape in 2023, didn't come out the right time, which is funny to your point, Billy, when you're talking about Luther Burden coming out now, or sorry, maybe that was you, Uriah, saying like maybe the right voices were talking to Luther to say, hey, this might be the right class for you to get drafted in the first round. I think that is the case. I think that there were some folks not steering Ollie Gordon and Devin Neal in the right direction to, you know, declare when they needed to. So I think that's just kind of the reality of where this running back class is. It's so insanely saturated that there's going to be a lot of these guys who, you know, had standout years in the past, but their 2024 just wasn't necessarily as appealing, unfortunately. What have you found, Uriah?
Well, again, this is pretty good because the film is bashing the sheets for the most part. The missed tackle force percentage, as you were asking about, is 21.1. It's not great. I mean, that's like your average, just like run of the mill Jag running back. Yards per route run, 0.75. Doesn't get me excited at all in PPR. His elusive rating for PFF was 72.7. That's not good. Yards after the catch, or yards after contact per attempt, 3.25. So yeah, I don't care how big he is, he's going down. Looks like Tarzan. Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Breakaway percentage, 29.3 is also really mediocre. Just pulling up real quick injury history. It did look like in 2024 that there's there were 3 games where he was removed from the field for leg injury. And we all know that college athletics are very, very, very good at telling you exactly what's wrong with their players. So maybe what you saw from 2023 to 2024 actually does happen to do with him being injured in 2024, and maybe it's more nagging than maybe they wanted to lead on to. So all that kind of checks out. According to NFL mock database, he's being mocked at pick 105. So we're saying top of the 4th round right there.
Mm-hmm.
Not exciting.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
No. I mean, it seems like we kind of agree all around. Real quick here, hot take, excluding Genty, this running back class is a tad overrated. Feels like 2020. I feel like a lot of the excitement is being misconstrued, where I think everybody's excited it's a more deep running back class than it is a more elite type running back class. I need to give Genty another run through before we break him down on here. I feel like everybody I hear is like, he's basically in the Saquon Barkley tier, and I don't quite see him as a prospect at that level. Maybe it's somewhere in between where I'm at and where they're at. But yeah, that I just as an aside, we'll get into that at some point. I heard somebody refer, or as a kind of comp for Ollie Gordon, was Latavius Murray. And they seemed kind of excited about it, which is crazy to me. Latavius Murray, even in his younger years, was kind of a plotter too, right? Like that's kind of what he is. Like he's not a bad player, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I heard that comp. One thing that Jake said about, you're watching the 2023 tape versus 2024, and that's not like a bad thing to do, don't get me wrong, and I'm not shitting on that necessarily, but for me, I'm solely concerned with the latest year and what they put on tape and produced, unless there's like super extenuating circumstances, like they're coming back from a serious injury, they only played half the year or something, like then I'll go back and look at maybe 2023 and be like, all right, let me just see what their most potential when not injured is versus what it looks like when they're coming off an injury, even though that may be who they are, which is why I do put more stock into the 2024, this year's tape, whatever year it may be. Though it's good to see development. Like, I think Joe Burrow, I remember watching his tape the year prior to when he was coming to when he won the national championship and was coming out and all that. And it was like, holy cow, this guy is a different human being. And so, like, it's not a bad thing, and it's good to get your eyes on that development and see it. But for me, on a large scale, and honestly, I think in quarterback, it might be more important to look a year back and see the development there, just because of how, like, IQ rich that position is. But one way or another, I just wanted to say that, just because we were kind of talking through 2023, 2024 tape. And yeah, I've always had that mindset about it as we break down these players. But okay, Ollie Gordon. I'm glad I'm not crazy. I heard some people with a little bit of excitement, I think, for him and this next player we're about to talk about. And I was just kind of like, I don't quite see it, really. We got Iston here, Frank Bros in the Discord. I agree with the Genty take. I love that. Thank you. More making me not feel crazy. So I appreciate that very much. All right, so we're going to hop into our next one here is going to be Dylan Sampson. Tennessee back. I'm just looking at the nods on the screen, make sure I got that right. All right, Tennessee
Correct,
back. Yes. Yeah. So another back that I'm not super excited about, kind of in the Ollie Gordon range, I feel like, at the end of the day, but for different reasons, different backs. I'll kind of give the overall breakdown for me. Straight line runner with average vision. Good processing at the line of scrimmage to identify and hit a hole, but lacks athleticism to escape defenders. Creates his own yards and consistently gains yards after contact. Lacks power to carry defenders and drive piles. Doesn't exhibit lateral agility or much bend body control. Best attribute might be burst in short spurts. Displays reliable hands, but mostly on like dump offs. So again, that route refinement kind of grade is not going to really be very high. Not many big plays, but straightaway runs without much contact when they hit. So when the big plays do hit, it's really straightaway runs without much contact. I could have definitely written that better. Good body type. So I think he's like a good low center of gravity body type, and he has like good gait, good fundamentals, but he just lacks athleticism to really do anything with it. And just going back to kind of the pass catching ability, I do think that he has reliable hands. I did see some drops on the limited tape that was watched. He does have a little bit of a clunky transition speed, catch to run transition speed. It's just not very smooth, in my opinion. Lacks direct contact balance. Like I said, good gait, fundamentally sound footwork, like all that stuff. Not really many wasted steps when he's moving. But yeah, just, it's just nothing to really get overly excited about. He did one, I guess the last thing I'll mention here before I throw it to Jake, the pass protection. He lacks technique. He doesn't get low or seem to understand leverage, and is a liability, in my opinion. He gets blown up in pass protection. And if I'm writing that, it is pretty noticeable on tape. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think he has okay vision and good processing, but maybe a little bit questionable at the second level. Thoughts from you, Jake?
Yeah, I actually wrote a few different items here, but I think overall, I'm also pretty off of Dylan Sampson. All right, let's start from the top. I did find that he overutilizes spinouts, which I thought were just a really weird trait. I saw him do it like 4 or 5 times in tape, and I was just like, I don't think I've seen someone do this as much as like dudes who play Madden online. Like, this is crazy. Like, this guy literally tries to spin out of tackles relentlessly. I also find that, yeah, literally. I find that it disorients his body direction too post spin, so he doesn't really know where he's showing up to. And then to your point, almost like that second level of vision is just gone because he's probably dizzy. He probably doesn't know where to go afterward. He is incredibly vertical of a runner, and I mean that with both his body disposition as well as just like the way he runs upfield. So I don't find that he has a lot of expression in his game. I don't find that he's able to find holes particularly well. I actually watched a video of his game against Kentucky this year, which was ironically titled like his career best day. I think he had like 22 carries for like 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think his largest run was like 18 or 19 yards. Like, by all means, it was a very productive day, and I'm not shitting on it. It was just like I expected him from that title to have at least just like one explosive run. There were zero. They're like he literally, like, even the 18-yard run was just like a bowling ball moving through people. So yeah, I think his vision was pretty deeply impacted. I even think that his first level vision is pretty questionable and probably average at best. I did find his hands to actually be below average. I might have watched a couple different games than you. He did also have multiple drops. So if we're watching different games and he has multiple drops across them, not great. The other thing I did find that he lacked was just like general aggression towards a pass. And a lot of that had to do with their freshman quarterback just having a lot of misplaced passes, typically on screens, typically on dump offs. And, from a relatively more senior player, you would expect him to take on that responsibility a bit more. And I didn't find that he did. I have him sitting all the way at the bottom of my running back list so far, and he's actually neck and neck with Ollie Gordon. So, the two of them are sitting there dead at the bottom, which is why I kind of prefaced this section as not super excited to talk negatively about these guys. Yeah. I do think that both of them have some positive attributes, but I will say that I think Ollie, like, if I was stuck near the end of the fourth or the middle of the fourth round and I had to choose between the two of them, I'm heavily going over Ollie Gordon over Dylan Sampson, regardless of landing spot. The only thing that will change my opinion there will probably be draft capital, but the running back room is not going to be the differentiation for me.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there for sure. I mean, in terms of the grading scale, Ollie Gordon's like 10 points above.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Above Dylan Sampson. I'm really not very fond of Dylan Sampson. Like you were talking about kind of his strength and power. I don't think he has really any power to offer either. I don't really see much there. Like I see the excitement in terms of like his body type for the position and like what could be if he was athletic. Cause like in college you kind of see some of it, but it's just not really there in my opinion. One thing I noticed was like when I like to, after I watch like a bunch of all 22, usually 2 to 3 games, sometimes more if I'm like really struggling with a guy, I'm like, I can't understand what would I grade this trait? And I keep watching. But with him, after that, then I go and I'll look up like their highlights because like I do think that, if you don't watch the highlights, you might be missing something. I want to see like the best of the best along with just the down to down play. And with him, when I went and watched his highlights, I had already seen everything on the all 22. And I was like, that's bad. Because like I didn't watch every game. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so like there should be more there in my opinion. So yeah, I agree with you, especially on that take. I think they'll both be towards the bottom. I think I'd much rather have Ollie Gordon in almost any situation. Really quick here, Jacob, Tennessee offense has shown to be fool's gold when it comes to NFL prospects, something to consider. Yeah, hasn't been great.
You're saying Velus Jones didn't hit?
Are you kidding?
Yeah, they tend to make college players look pretty good.
They do.
Yeah, they do. That offense, I think that's part of the problem, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, some of these running backs that don't look special. This is AJ, sorry, from the YouTube comments. Some of those running backs that don't look special might be able to flourish in a committee. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some of these guys for sure at the end of the day who are drafted in the 4th, 5th round who are going to be in a committee style, backfield where you're going to be interested in them. And it might be Ollie Gordon, like compared to Dylan Sampson, but like you're not going to be that interested, I don't think, in these two guys. But I don't know. Uriah, you want to finish us off on that one with your thoughts?
Sure, real quick. I was just pulling it up. Last year, just because I was curious, Dylan Sampson had 2 drops. Ollie Gordon had 0, according to PFF. I was just curious. So,
yeah.
Let's see. Get back on the right thing. So, yeah, Dylan Sampson, again, like you were saying, doesn't really do much. Yards after contact per attempts 3.6, which is not great. PFF has his elusive rating at 107.5, though. So I don't know if like maybe once he's got a little bit of wiggle room, like he's making, lemonade out of lemons, right? So missed tackle force percentage is 27.1, which is fine. His yards per team attempt is 1.7. His yards per route one's 0.8, which is not great. Like none of these things are very good except for his elusive rating. And I don't know exactly how well PFF's elusive rating really translates to the NFL. I can't speak on it. I haven't looked at that specifically. His breakaway percentage is 30.4, which is also just not great. One thing he has going for him, he's an early declare. I did watch him, and he kind of reminded me of like DeAndre Swift a little bit, but you guys were saying like he doesn't have very good vision. I saw a lot of patience, but maybe that's why I stick to the sheets and not the film. But it seemed like he was waiting for blocks quite a bit. So it's kind of, it's the only guy I watched that you guys put on the sheet, and I'm like, damn, I didn't see any of that. But according to NFL mock database, he's going at 95, so about 10 slots ahead of Ollie. And I think just kind of how we've gone through, let me look here real quick. We have gone through Cam Skatebo, Caleb Johnson, Dylan Sampson, Omarion Hampton, Ollie Gordon II, and Devin Neal. And I think that Dylan Sampson's probably pretty far towards the bottom on this list. Close to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do want to jump in and say on the patience thing, literally in my notes in the vision section, okay, vision and patience is what is written. And I think that's about average and is how I would grade it for him. I think where Jake and I both agree is like at the second level, it seems to deteriorate. And it just may be because of how he approaches trying to, break tackles and that whole thing. And in terms of the elusive rating, like he is kind of agile. He does break quite a few tackles in college. I just don't think that the way he's getting it done is going to translate very well to the NFL, especially with kind of like how with his size and lack of power or strength. I'm just not sure it's going to translate. But I do agree. I do think the patience is there. So I don't think that's an observation or a poor observation. I think it's a good observation. Yeah, I think that's all we got for those guys.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, please.
I think the one item, because I liked the comment that AJ provided about some of these running backs that don't look special and might be able to flourish in a committee. Like in comparison to a lot of the guys that were drafted late last year in both the NFL draft and our own rookie drafts and in Dynasty, specifically in Superflex, I'm thinking of, Ray Davis's, Audric Estime, Tyrone Tracy, Braylon Allen. I'm missing some. Bucky Irving. Like, of that group, I can name probably 3 out of those 5 guys that I would say looked relatively special in their college tape. And that would be my differentiation between like a negative criticism towards these types of players, that like even in like for Ollie Gordon, I only watched about 5 games. Dylan Sampson, I only watched about 2. Like I know that that's a little bit more limited than what I typically would do. But I still think that there should be some exposure to relatively high-end level of play that I just didn't get, that I noted on realistically Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, and Audric Estime. I wasn't high on Braylon Allen, and it didn't really translate to the NFL super well. He had like a nice little window at the beginning of the year. But regardless, there's always going to be misses by any means. I'm not trying to like defend it. I'm just saying like I do think that there were elements that we could and should be able to see that I'm just not really getting from either of these guys from the 2024 tape that I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Yeah, I think it's a great point because all those guys exhibited some pretty strong juice where you're like, oh, whoa. Well, you see those kind of plays, and these guys just don't have that at all. So yeah, I'm right there with you, Jake. I think that's another good observation. Another good round of prospect profiles. I think we covered those really well. I like that we're on the same page for the most part with those. I actually think there was maybe the most, not necessarily disagreement, but differences in the evaluation on like a Luther Burden, even though they were more minor. I found that interesting. So yeah, it's always good though. I like that. I like getting, having kind of the breakdowns and the evaluations tested a little bit. I think that's why I love doing this, talking it out a little bit with some people we trust. So great job, guys. Awesome stuff. We are going to move on to a couple trades here before we get on out of here. Jake tried to make it a 2-hour show, but we defeated him. we defeated him.
It's
All
an
right.
Excalibur moment. Yeah.
Yes. All right. First one we got here. Trades, Dynasty trades. Kyler Murray plus the 401 for Michael Penix and the 207. Oof. That's a hot one. Oh, wow. Man, my brain kind of just like initially leans the Kyler side. But that's where I'm gonna kind of leave it. But the Penix side feels pretty appetizing as well. So I think it's a good trade, but yeah, Kyler, I just feel like edges it out in terms of upside, with the 207 being meh. What you guys think?
Rookie fever got me leaning the Penix side slightly, but it's just so hard after not seeing Penix. He didn't play a lot, but when he did, it was good, right? I mean, he definitely elevated those players more than Cousins did after we found out he was injured, apparently. But I think, just to be on the conservative side of things, I think I got to agree with Billy here, and you got to go with Kyler. I mean, his job's pretty secure for quite a while. Penix is probably going to be fine, but I just don't think that 207 is quite enough to get there. The dude getting the 401 on top of Kyler, like, I don't know. I guess that's like a free pick. So I think I'll go with Kyler here.
Yeah, I guess in non-controversial fashion, I will also agree with the group. Funny enough, these are actually trades that I found.
President of the Penix fan club. I'm surprised.
Is that actually how his last name is pronounced?
No,
Penix?
It's gotta be Penix.
It's Penix, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really? No, you don't like that.
I live up here.
It's so close.
Billy has always pronounced this poor guy's last name as Penix, and I thought he was
like
fucking with us. But like, and now that
it may have started
is also
as a
saying
joke.
it, I'm like, there's no way in hell we're all going to start saying this. Like, there's no way. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
AJ
For fuck's
said
sake.
definitely.
You've literally been saying
the
this for
way
like
I
over
said
a
it.
year, dude.
It may have started as a joke, and then it just kind of replaced his name for me. I'm not sure, but
You definitely overheard someone else say it like that, and
you
you're
get
like,
uncomfortable
"Oh, I trust
every
them."
time, right? You get uncomfortable every time I say
I
it.
literally do. I like my whole body shrivels up. Like,
Look, there's nothing wrong with a little Penix, right?
literally, you're giving me a little Penix. Anyway, I will. Yeah, I'll take the Kyler side. I do think that this is one of those that, we saw a glimpse of Penix, and we really like want things to work out. We like probably a lot of what that offense has to offer, and I really, 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 in a fantasy landscape, would prefer the quarterback that has dual threat. Like, are we doing penis visuals? Okay. Yep, we are. Awesome. Great. I'm just gonna continue moving through this trade in my line of logic. But yeah, I think the ability to have a rushing upside quarterback, even with Kyler not rushing as much, whereas Penix doesn't have that at all. Like, I'm just gonna take that quarterback every single time. I think there's also like a good round and a half to almost 2 round of startup ADP difference between the two quarterbacks, and that's way more significant than the 207 and the 401. So I think I'd just be trying to get more on top if I was trying to sell off of Kyler, and I'd probably trying to get into a different asset personally. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement.
Okay, cool. All right, last one here. We have Ben. Sorry, I could be a little bit behind with my internet, but I don't know. Okay, really quick here. Ben Sinnott plus Austin Eckler for the 302 and the 304. I'll be pretty quick here. I kind of just lean the players. I think Sinnott, the chance on him is enough. I mean, 302 and 304 are probably moderately interesting, but yeah. I'll just go with Sinnott, the second round pick, and Eckler, who I actually think might offer okay production again next year.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like what you said about Sinnott. Like, just the gamble's kind of worth it there. Not so impressed with Eckler's future, but Yeah, 302, 304 just don't quite do it there for me. I don't know. Maybe if this was something like closer to the actual, like after the NFL draft has happened and we're getting ready to draft our rookies, I could see where like there's a situation where like I fool myself and I really want the 302 and 304. I just don't want them today.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say, I think this is actually like a bad process trade, in all honesty. Like, I don't think if you're the owner of the 302 and the 304, I don't think you're capitalizing as much off this value as you possibly could. And, I personally like both of those players. Like, those are assets that I think are definitely acquirable and probably have relatively positive roles moving into 2025. But like, this definitely is one of those situations where on the clock, you could probably elevate Eckler into maybe even a younger, more promising running back, instead of going that path. So this is one of those where I just want to kind of wait and see rather than, move myself off of those assets just to kind of not clog my roster. But like, I think your idea, if you're acquiring Sinnott and Eckler, is that you're like solidifying your roster. I think instead all you're doing is putting yourself in a situation where both of those assets might not have any value moving forward, depending on what happens in the NFL draft. So just something to be mindful of.
No, I actually think that's a great point. I think in general, people sell their picks too early in the offseason. Like, just like for the most part, hold those bad boys, and whatever you were going to try to get done, that pick's going to be almost as valuable, if not more valuable, every time when you are on the clock or closer to on the clock. So I've gotten quite a few first round picks early this offseason, and every time I think, I'm just like, man, I wouldn't trade my first round pick right now. Like, I'd just wait, because like you're getting like 50 cents on the dollar right now, pretty much is how it goes. So it's not nearly as lucrative this time of year. So yeah, I totally agree with that in general. Awesome. We did it. We covered it. We covered it all. Thanks again. I really appreciate you guys going through the leaving leagues thing with me, because I know that wasn't necessarily maybe a actionable topic, but it was something that I feel like a lot of people run into, and it's worth talking through. Did a great job on the prospect profiles. Really, really good stuff. I love how we're covering them. I'm excited for the coming ones. Sad that we won't have Jake here to go through it, but once again, we will have his thoughts. So Jake, appreciate you being here, and we will see you down the road a little bit. Hopefully work doesn't crush you too much.
Hope that too. I hope that too.
Yeah, exactly. With that said, anybody who isn't in the Discord, jump in the Discord. We love connecting with everybody in there. Also, anybody who wants to watch us live on the YouTube channel, we love talking to you. Love having you in the YouTube comments. Really elevates the show. So appreciate everybody. If you want to follow us, you can follow us on the socials at Dynasty Underdog. We are on Blue Sky now. At Willie Beeman FF, at Jake Abrams, at Uriah Dawkins. Follow us, follow the show. Thank you everybody for being here, and peace out. Catch you next time.